Hi, everyone. This is Jennifer Coons, one of the reference librarians at the Haverford Township Free Library, with your June 11th COVID check-in. Today, I wanted to talk about some headlines that we've seen in the past actually just in the past week. But I'm going to focus on one in particular because I thought it was really interesting. And so here we are. So the headline, where we are right now, is the website of an organization that completed a study. But I'm going to talk about the headline. The headlines were different, but I picked one from NPR, and the headline is "Modelers Suggest Pandemic Lockdowns Saved Millions from Dying of COVID-19." So we're here there were two studies that this newspaper article was based on. One study came out of the Imperial College of London School of Public Health, and that study looked at 11 European countries. And this study, the study that's talked about on this website that I've got up here for you, is from the Global Policy Lab at the University of California, Berkeley. And I'm going to talk about this study today. So first, what I want to talk about is, what is a modeler? So the headline says modelers suggest, they're not saying this is absolute, but they're suggesting that the pandemic lockdowns save millions from dying of COVID-19. So scientific modeling is when scientists, mathematicians, statisticians, it's the representation of an idea or process that is used to describe something that cannot be experienced directly. So we can't experience what would have happened if we didn't do, the lockdowns and the school closures and all that. So scientific modeling is able to kind of look at the what if. It doesn't mean that it actually absolutely would have happened in that way, but it gives you a general idea of what might have happened in a what if case. And this case is like, what if we hadn't done any of those policies? What if we just went on business as usual when COVID hit our country? All right, so since the emergence of COVID-19, there have actually been a lot of models. There have been models that show the growth of the disease, and a lot of graphs, and especially like linear graphs that are showing hospital beds. They're prospective modeling, like into the future, like how many hospital beds will we need? How many ventilators will we need? What's likely to be the outcome in this region where the hospitals maybe aren't as well equipped as other regions, and all kinds of models like that. So this research team at the Global Policy Lab, they wanted to create a model to demonstrate how many COVID-19 cases and deaths have been avoided due to the various policy measures, like stay-at-home orders, school closings, travel restrictions, large-scale social distancing, that have been instituted across different countries and local regions. Policy studies often will examine the cost-benefit ratio of a particular policy. So they're what they're trying to determine is the cost of the policy worth the benefit. Now, in this case, we're all really aware of the cost of this catastrophic, economic cost that all of these policies have resulted in our country and all over the world. And so one of the researchers says, he said, we see the economic pain. What we cannot see is lives never lost, people who never got sick. So this is what the study aimed to demonstrate. And they also wanted their work to be a guide to areas in the world that have not yet experienced, have not yet been hit hard by the virus, and like to be a guide, like, well, these are the benefits of if you institute some of these policies. So they studied 6 countries, and the countries they studied, they chose those countries based on the policies that were deployed. I'm going to scroll down here while I'm talking. They studied, and they actually studied them in the order that the disease hit those countries. So China, South Korea, Italy, France, Iran, and the United States. And they looked at national, state, and local policies in those regions. and they assembled the data and they matched it with infection rates. Then they measured the bends in curves as each policy was deployed. So, for example, you stay-at-home order. They looked at the bends over a 2 to 3 week period because you need that lag time. It takes 2 to 3 to maybe 4 weeks to see what the effect is going to be of a policy, whether you're locking down or opening up. The time frame was between January 16 and April 6th. And they looked at anti-contagion policies, including travel bans, business closures. Here are their key findings. Business closures, the quarantining of positive cases, lockdowns, home isolation, emergency declarations, expansions of paid sick leave, school closures, the canceling of large-scale events like music festivals or large religious pilgrimages, also prohibiting large religious gatherings, working from home, and then a category they call other, which includes museum and library closings. They used a method called econometrics, and that is a type of economic study where statistics and math are used to show the relationship between the economy and some outside event. So let's say a hurricane hits a region. What does this do to the growth of the economy? And so you're studying exponentially that way. And the Global Policy Lab has actually done research on these types of things. So a catastrophic climate event hits a region, what does it do to the economy? So they're using that approach with policy in COVID-19. So policy hits COVID-19, what does that do to the growth of COVID-19? All right. So when you look down here, sorry, looking at my notes. Because I like to know how these studies, I want to know what did they do? How did they do the study? How did they find their information? So you see these down here. I'm going to make myself a little smaller. They have some graphics here. The red, this is what would have happened if none of these policies were deployed. It says, we estimate that anti-contagion policies averted 62 million confirmed cases across the 6 countries in our sample, which are China, South Korea, Italy, France, Iran, and the United States, as of April 6, 2020. This corresponds to more than 500 million averted infections after accounting for underreporting. So somehow they accounted for the underreporting of infections. All right, so let's go look at the United States. And I'm still here. Okay. And what you'll see is they have this visual here that's interactive, actually. You see the balloons blowing up. This is what actually happened after the policies were deployed. If you see the red blowing up, those are the cases you see, of course, in New York, Washington, California, where the biggest outbreaks are. This is what the outbreaks would have been had we not instituted any policy. This is on the right hand. There would have been way, way more cases, and likely more deaths too. The key takeaways: in the absence of policy, the growth rate of COVID was 34%, or doubling about every 2.5 days. It says without any policies, this growth rate would have led to 4.8 million more cases by April 6th in the United States. In contrast, we did have, as of April 6th, we had a little over 365,000 confirmed cases on April 6th. And now they also looked at which policies tended to have the most impact. It says policies that had the largest impacts were social distancing policies, shelter in place, closing businesses, and the quarantining of positive cases. And there are a lot of other interesting visuals here that you can look at. So it's really fascinating. They also have a video of how they did the study, talking about all the different mathematical models they used, and their as well as their motive for doing it, which is to help others and to try to demonstrate the benefits. So one of the researchers says, quote, "Never in human history have so many lives been saved in such a short period of time." And he goes on to say that this was due to a collective action on a global scale that I think people should be really proud of. And I just want to give a little bit of an analogy here. If people remember Y2K, there was a lot of hoopla around that, where, oh my gosh, the computers, everything's going to fall apart because the computers had all been coded to 00 was going to mean 1900 and not 2000, and there's going to be a business collapse and everything was going to be a catastrophe. And that didn't happen. And a lot of people looked at that, myself included, saying, oh, that was a lot of nothing. Like, what were people making the big deal about? And in reality, because I've actually read a little bit about this and listened to some interviews, that could have been kind of a catastrophe. But the reason it wasn't is that a lot of people were working on it. You had software tech people just on that and making sure that the computers were going to do what they needed to do, reprogramming and working very, very hard. But because we never saw any catastrophe happen, we thought it was just people were just overreacting. And yes, there were some crazy overreaction type of responses. But it actually turns out that was a preventive, that things were being done to keep something horrible happening because of Y2K. So I'm using an analogy here with COVID-19 that there is a benefit. There was a benefit to saving human lives and not, overwhelming our healthcare system, and also saving people from getting really sick and maybe having horrible side effects. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about this morning. I want to talk to you about that study. And if you see a headline saying, how many, oh, look at this, the study shows that there were this many deaths were avoided, etc. This is one of the studies that those articles are talking about. I'm going to scroll up the page now to the top of it again. If you want to check out the website, it's globalpolicy.science/COVID-19. And this will talk to you about the study. Thank you for being with me today. Stay well, stay healthy. Continue to do your social distancing and as best you can. And I'll see you next time.